Fantastic. Carl, you've come on camera. I was just about to introduce you. Everybody, thank you so much. It's great to see all the interaction in the chat, and we've got a real good range of people here. I'm going to hand over to Carly Perry, who's going to introduce the session and the speakers, and yes, give a little bit background from Spring. So Carly, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Imelda, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Knowledge Showcase. I'm Carly Perry, Managing Director of Spring Innovation. This is the 5th Knowledge Showcase that we've run in partnership with water companies and suppliers now. I'm really happy to say that today we're partnering with Northumbrian Water, the Cabinet Office and Geospatial Commission to share insights about how to deliver and scale a nationwide project. For anybody who doesn't know Spring, we are the Innovation Centre of Excellence for the water sector across the UK and Ireland, and we're here to accelerate innovation and enable collaboration. So today is a great opportunity for you to learn from a hugely successful project in the sector and take those learnings and accelerate your own innovative solutions. We are supported by all 19 water companies across the UK and Ireland, as well as supply chain. And a very conservative average of how many times innovation projects are duplicated in the sector is 4. So on average, an innovation project is duplicated 4 times. So Spring is here to bring that average down, and this service offering is part of that. So we want to share knowledge that helps you to implement into your business, know what's happening in the sector, and to then remove the duplication of efforts that are happening. After this session, we'll be uploading a case study with all the information about this project to the Spring platform, and you can then share that link with anyone. The video from this session will be uploaded. And in that platform, we're now building a bank of knowledge that you can go and search. So if you want to access that, you can go in through the Spring website and get into the platform and use that knowledge for your benefit. So far over these showcases, we've had over 950 registrations. We've had over 1,000 people go and click on the case studies that are in the platform. So this is really growing into a great way for us to facilitate knowledge share in the sector. But it wouldn't be possible without all the partners that we have to do this. We've got a few more showcases planned in the months coming. So we've got Portsmouth Water and LeakBot later in April. We've got United Utilities and Data Technics in May. And then we've got Welsh Water on eDNA taste odour monitoring in June, and United Utilities on scaling innovation in practice later in June as well. So keep your eye out for more information through our LinkedIn pages. But ultimately, we're here to help facilitate connections, matchmaking, acceleration of innovation and collaboration in this sector. So with that in mind, let me introduce the speakers for today's session. So you'll be hearing next from Angela Magoska, who is the Head of Innovation at Northumbrian Water. You'll be hearing about the project insights from Clive Sermon-Wells, who's Innovation Partnerships Manager at Northumbrian Water, and also Stephen Thorpe, who is the National Underground Asset Register Onboarding Lead at Geospatial Commission. So we've got a great group of speakers here. Really encourage you to enjoy the learning, think about what you can do with the insights that they're going to share with you and how you can embed those into your businesses. So a huge thank you from me for everybody who's come and is willing to learn today. A huge thank you to all of the speakers who are going to share their insights with everyone. And with that in mind, I will hand over to Angela Magoska.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here as part of this Spring Knowledge Showcase event. It's absolutely a delight to be sharing this National Underground Asset Register project, because like any innovation project, it's actually really, really hard to do and actually takes time, perseverance and commitment to actually bring these things to life. And this has just been a wonderful journey that we've been on that actually sprang out of our very first Innovation Festival back in 2017. So far we've run 6 of these innovation festivals, and we really have honed the right breeding ground and place where we can really create the right environment for innovation to thrive. It is an outdoor event where we run design sprints and data hacks across a week. We usually run in excess of 30 activities across that week, covering many, many different topics. And it is an outdoor event where you wear your own clothes, and we also sprinkle it with fun, music, poetry, and really anything. And what we found that this environment does is it breaks down barriers, encourages a diverse audience to attend, and really helps us tackle some of the huge challenges that we face in our water sector today. And this is really important because at the end of the day, innovation and all of the solutions all come down to people, and people being willing to share, being willing to collaborate. And this is a testament to actually what is possible, and is probably one of our most exciting projects that has come out of the festival so far. So I'm not going to steal any of Clive and Stephen's thunder. They're going to share all of the details on this brilliant project with you. But I just would like to offer you all the invitation to come to our Innovation Festival this year, which is happening the week of July 10th. Once again, we'll be running lots of different activities, tackling the really tough challenges that we're facing in our sectors, and actually challenges that are actually cross-cutting across many different utilities and indeed sectors that make it worthwhile for anybody to attend. So that offer is there, and we very much hope that we'll see you there and that you enjoy hearing all about the National Underground Asset Register from Clive and Stephen. So over to you.
Thanks very much, Angela. I'm just going to tinker with my screen and make sure that I have some slides in front of me to speak from. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the National Underground Asset Register all the way from the very, very earliest days, sort of back in 2017, 2018, right through to the present, and to tell you how this sort of vision and ambition has scaled. But before I go any further, I will just point out for some of the non-water people who might be in the room that Northumbrian Water are one of 19 water and sewerage companies in England and Wales, and we serve the northeast of England, where we provide water and sewerage services, and Essex and Suffolk, where we provide water only. Our good friends at Anglian providing the sewerage services in those areas. And we've got a network of about 55,000 kilometres of water mains and sewers. So let's start by examining the problem, which is what we do with any kind of innovation challenge, you know, a fundamental understanding of what the problem is. I'm not sure how familiar the audience is with digging holes and excavations. What I've done here is I've got a few examples of some holes. I was at the hole on the left last week, and you can see in that hole that there's a telecom cables running through, there's street light cabling running through it, there's a big water main, which was the purpose of this excavation, right next to a great big, and this is I think probably 16-inch gas main, and just below the street lighting there's high voltage electricity. And now that's not completely typical, but it's quite common to find a really congested underworld. There are loads of services buried, most of them are buried under the ground, and many of them are really, really shallow as well. And this can present problems. Obviously, if you cut through the tarmac with a still saw, you probably just go straight through that fibre optic cable there, or that copper cable. So we must provide our excavation teams with maps and plans of what lies under the ground, and therein lies the problem, because we don't do that very well. We haven't done that very well for years. Nothing's changed for years in the way we provide information to field workers about what is buried under the ground. And essentially, the consequences of getting it wrong are really, really bad. Electricity strikes can kill and have killed people, as have gas explosions. I just wanted to draw your attention. This picture on the right is often used when we talk about utility strikes, but it actually comes from a Daily Mail report of a utility strike on fibre optic cable running through ducting. So somebody was drilling, a third-party contractor was drilling using a corkscrew drill, and they hit a telecom duct, went straight through it, but because it was a corkscrew and it was rotating, it wound the fibre and the copper cable around the corkscrew, pulled it out from the exchange about 2 kilometres away, and disconnected hundreds and hundreds of people from the internet connectivity for about 3 days, causing really, really bad publicity for Virgin Media, who were using their services to provide internet services to thousands of people in London. Not their fault. It was caused by a third party, but just an illustration. So why do we need a national underground asset register? Let's have a look. There's multiple reasons here, and I'm going to go through them. But some of the facts that we do know are there are 4 million kilometres of buried cables and pipes in the UK. We dig about 4 million holes a year. Northumbrian Water dig over 100,000 holes a year just in our region. And there are believed to be, although there are no sort of super hard facts in this area, 60,000 accidental strikes on utilities. That's where one asset owner or contractor causes damage to the services of another, or their own, in fact. So planners and excavators need data to do their jobs, but that data is held by myriad different people. This is what we supply at the moment to people and have done for years. So essentially, individual PDF plans and maps of individual services. So you can see here we've got water, sewerage, water, electricity and gas. The plans are taken from individual websites of the asset owners, and they are at different scales, different orientations. There's different symbology used, colours and line styles used to represent those. And there's a limited amount of information that's presented on them. And we make a pack of those in the back office for every hole we dig, and we must provide those. And if people get out onto site and find that the hole is just off the edge of the map, they can't continue work. They have to wait for another pack to be produced, and these packs can take 10-15 minutes per pack to produce. And if you multiply that up by the number of holes we dig, you can see this is a real labor intensive cottage industry that's going on in most utilities that are digging holes. We've applied robotic automation to this, but there's a fundamental problem with this. We provide these plans and maps to the field crews and then expect them to fuse those maps together in their own mind and build up a picture of what's really going on under the ground and work out whether or not it's safe. It's a bit like giving a set of plans to a hiker who's walking to the top of Ben Nevis, one with the dangerous river courses, one with the roads, one with the footpaths, and one with the vegetation and the hedges, and one with the relief, and expecting them to get to the top safely. It's just madness. I think what most people involved in this envisage is a single view of all of those things overlaid that they can interrogate, find out more information, identify the high and low risk areas, and have a really clear scheme of line styles and colours to represent what is going on. And then you've got a fighting chance of understanding what's going on. So Angela mentioned that our 2017 Innovation Festival, we ran a number of sprints, and 3 of them in particular concluded that what we needed to contribute towards the particular societal problems that they were working on were a better map of what's under the ground. And there are a number of reasons for this, 3 primarily. 1, to reduce the likelihood of utility strikes and to keep people safer who are working for us. To improve the efficiency in the back office, and you can see how inefficient it can be, and to reduce the disruption to citizens, because clearly every time we dig a hole, it causes disruption. If we find unexpected things under the ground or there are problems due to strikes, then it just elongates the process. It incurs fines for the permit to work from the local authority and causes more disruption, more pollution while cars idle in traffic queues. So really good reasons to do something about this problem. Now, when I joined the company, we don't often see quotes from Barack Obama in these kind of presentations, but I thought this was particularly pertinent because at the time that Obama made this quote about us being the ones who are going to make the change, I was working in the GIS team at Northumbrian Water, managing a team of GIS developers, and part of the process was involved with providing those packs. And I could see how inefficient it was. And I spoke up at the time, I remember, and I said, you know, what we really need is for somebody senior within the company to do something about this problem and to sort it out and bring the parties together to share data better and provide a single platform. What I hadn't realized was that 10 years later, that somebody would be me. And what I should have done is acted at the time, spoken up, and done something about it myself, as I have ended up doing anyway 10 years later. But, you know, in those 10 years between then and the Innovation Festival, nothing's changed. Nothing had changed. We're still producing exactly the same maps and plans as we had done. So let's talk about the Innovation Festival and how all of this kicked off. So what we do at the Innovation Festival, what we did in 2018 at the Innovation Festival, where creating a map of what's under the ground was the primary source of the sprint that I led. We take over the whole of the Gosforth Park Racecourse, which is a horse racing course just north of Newcastle upon Tyne, and they have a marquee village. And in each of those marquees, which are quite large, we house a design sprint, a year's worth of work in a week, or a data hack. And we have between 30 to 50 people in each sprint tent, and each sprint is led by a high-profile sponsor. In this case, the Ordnance Survey, our national mapping agency. And that year in particular, it's much bigger now, but in 2018, there were 13 sprints going on various societal issues. And I guess the very first learning, I'm going to use this slide again and again throughout the presentation to draw out some key points, key learnings and reflections on what we did here, was top-level commitment. So before this sprint ever took place, when we started partnering up and deciding, yes, I think we're going to do something about try and solve this problem and see how far we can get with it, our chief executive, Heidi Mottram, had spoken personally to the chief exec, who was Nigel Clifford at the time, of Ordnance Survey. And this was kind of facilitated by Martin Shaw, who worked for the Ordnance Survey at the time and was as much of a fan of doing something about this as I was, and encouraged us to get together as a partnership to do this. But that top level commitment meant that the Ordnance Survey sent a team of between 10 and 15 people to the festival that year to really put a lot of resource behind it and making it happen. And these sprints don't just happen overnight and for 5 days at the Innovation Festival. There's a huge lead up and a build up, and that team of people from Ordnance Survey were intimately involved, as was a small team at Northumbrian Water. So we set out to do 3 things in that week-long 5-day event at Gosforth Park. And the 3 things were to build a platform. And there was a certain amount of skepticism about what you could realistically do in that amount of time, but I was absolutely adamant that this wasn't going to be a talking shop, and that we were going to actually build a working demonstration platform during that week. That had to be a deliverable. The second thing was that we would come up with the data sharing principles, because essentially this is a data sharing problem. It's the technical platform is by far secondary to the data sharing difficulties that we have to overcome and the hurdles. And the third thing was to produce a business case that would suck in many, many more people to realize the benefits of doing something about this. So they were the 3 threads, and they were common to all of the stakeholders. So I guess this is my second learning, forget the organizational sector boundaries and just concentrate on the commonality between the common features of the problem that everybody shares, that all the stakeholders shared. And stakeholders and participants were a really important part of this sprint. One moment. So getting the right people involved was absolutely crucial, and we had a hit list of people who we felt we absolutely must have in the tent. So obviously Ordnance Survey and ourselves, but the key utility players in the northeast of England, who are Northern Power Grid, Northern Gas Networks and Openreach, and the local authority. So they were all really important stakeholders to have representation. But it wasn't. It was quite difficult to convince people to come to this Mad Hat event at the festival and to spend 5 days and commit 5 days to it. So I had to do an awful lot of persuasion work and spent weeks in the lead up to the festival trying to find the right people from those organisations to come along. And it was a mix. It was a mix of people, as you'll see as we come on. It wasn't just asset records managers or GIS people. It was all sorts of different people. And each organisation didn't need to send a whole team. They could send one person or multiple people to represent certain areas of that. Of the problem. But we also had representation from the University of Newcastle upon Tyne, so in the geomatics team, and we had a real mix of other asset owners. So UK Power Networks, who are the supplier for London, the electricity supplier for London, Network Rail, who are a national organisation. Openreach in particular were brilliant because they sent along 3 IT managers. So the point here was, it wasn't necessarily all people with the same job title who we were trying to get into the tent. It was a variety of different people, with one important factor, which I'll come on to in just a second. But we had some real high-tech, very, very capable geospatial organisations in the tent as well, who would be able to help build the platform. And we had some of our contractors as well. So at the time, Fastflow, S Group, MMB, and similar organisations who would provide actual excavators, people whose job was digging the road from day to day. So we had a real mix of people, and you can see how many people were there. But I guess the point here is, it wasn't about finding the person with the right job title. It was about finding one person from each of those organizations who was really passionate about that, about the problem, and bringing those together. So in my naivety, I thought, well, okay, we're going to build a platform. I'll ask everybody to bring along some data to the map for the whole of Newcastle from their organisation, and we'll share it and we'll build the platform, and it'll be all very straightforward. Of course, the reality is everybody said, absolutely no chance. We can't do that. We've all got asset data release processes to go through. We couldn't provide that much information. And there were all sorts of, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't provide this. So I got to the point where I thought the only way of really getting people to share data is to ask, under what circumstances would you be prepared to share data, for how long, and under what circumstances? So what we actually did was we identified 4 geographically distinct, very small locations around Newcastle upon Tyne, and we drew some polygons around them, and we said, would you be prepared to share these very, very small areas? And the response was yes, under these conditions. And everybody specified the conditions, like, yes, you can have it for 5 days. The data's not to be taken out of the tent. It must be held on a server within the tent and not remotely on the internet somewhere. And you must delete all of it at the end of the 5th day of the festival. So that's what we did. Our legal team got involved. We wrote up a data sharing agreement that encompassed all of those things to the satisfaction of all the key players, the local authorities, Openreach, very, very tight on how they would prepared to share their data, and these big utility companies, as well as some of the smaller ones and the local authorities. And that's what we did. So I guess key learning here is, focus on what you can do. Sometimes you face many reasons that will cause people to give up, but if you work through it and identify on what is possible, it's quite possible to share. And that's what happened on that day. When we started the festival, we walked into that tent and we had preloaded that data and provided it to Ordnance Survey, so they could walk in with a preloaded server that held the data. At least we got over that data, and we had the data we needed. So the formula for the sprint was, over the 5 days, there will be a split after day 2. So the first 2 days, we would concentrate on defining the problem and on day 2 and looking at it from every conceivable angle and from every kind of worker's point of view. On day 2, we would scope the solution and come up with, well, what could we do? And then for the remainder of the week, we would split and slice and dice ourselves in different ways and concentrate on those 3 things: producing a platform, building writing a business case, and building a sharing agreement. So one of the first things we did, it was the first thing we did, was split into groups of discipline. So again, disregarding who we worked for, all the excavators, people who dug holes or were involved in supervising holes being dug, were put onto one cabaret table. All of the people who were involved in the back office planning, production of the map packs, planning excavation work were in another. The asset records people, the managers and the technicians who updated GIS records were put in another. Interestingly, data access and legal people. So there were at least 3 qualified commercial lawyers in the tent sitting at a table together for different organizations, and data access people, data security people, all sitting together on one team. And then the GIS professionals, the people who could build platforms, who intimately understood data models and so forth, on the other. And they worked on those. They were the groups we worked in for the first 2 days. And the first question we asked was, if this is such a fantastic idea, why aren't we doing it already? What are the barriers? What were the things and that have stopped us from doing this, and the reasons we don't have a single platform, a single view that's available to all, where all the data is shared into a single platform? And there were a number of barriers that were very clear. So asset owners are very protective of their asset records. They see it as their own IPR. They spent many years building up that information. And there are commercial reasons why they wouldn't want to share willy-nilly with just anybody. So security reasons primarily, the use, a lot of this or some of this information is critical national infrastructure, so actually can't be shared. But there are commercial advantages, particularly in the telecoms field, to one telecom provider knowing the location of the ducts of another, and there are some of us sell these records. So if they get out into the public domain, they're no longer saleable. So people like to share on their own terms from their own platforms, and that's one of the reasons, each of the asset owners have built their own portal to share their own records in a very controlled way. Another big fear is around accuracy and liability. So no utility company is going to come out and say our records are 100% accurate. They've been built up over decades, and in some cases over 100 years. Records have come from paper records, as-built plans, to-be-built plans, or they've been surveyed as they've been put in the ground, and they've been surveyed using tape measures, theodolites, and then ultimately GNSS satellite data more recently. So a vast range of accuracies, and in many cases people don't know where their records came from, or they're just held on paper. And so there's great fears about the liabilities there might be around supplying inaccurate data that led then to a utility strike or an accident and somebody getting hurt. But of course, what we're asking here is for people to share information that they already share in maps and plans with each other. And so the information that they're sharing comes with disclaimers. If we provide, I don't know whether you can see this, but this is a typical paper plan that we provide, and there's a big section of disclaimer on the bottom of those, and everybody does that. So we've actually got over that problem already. Anyway, the other things were, if we were to share all of this information, we'd need a real trusted host who could hold data securely, and we'd need a data sharing agreement. So some really good conclusions there in understanding the problem. Another problem that we faced in tackling this problem was many of the people who were in the tent, who were involved in the process in one shape or form, apart from the guys who were right at the pointy end with a shovel and spade out in the field, most people hadn't actually observed the hole being dug. So you know what we did? We dug a hole. This took quite a lot of planning, actually, because we had to go through all of the existing planning processes just to dig a hole, even though there was no specific repair to be done. So with a lot of planning, we found at the Gosforth Park Racecourse, you can see it there with an arrow, an intersection of an electricity cable and a sewer, and we dug down in front of everybody. And what you can see on this slide, this is what's going on the other side of the barrier. So there was a whole group of people, and we brought everybody out in groups to talk to the excavators about the problem, you know, how they dig, how often they would check with a metal detector to see if there was anything there, how good they felt the plans that they received were, and what the problems were with the process. So that was a really useful and valuable, enlightening experience for everybody involved. Although it was a huge undertaking really to do that. Another thing that we did was to look at existing solutions on day 2 when we moved into solution finding. And this was absolutely crucial because, you know, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. What we're trying to do is take the best that already existed. So we looked at a number of international systems. So the CLIP system and the CLIC system, which are used in Belgium and Holland, where they had developed pretty well a NUR over there, but it was very early stage at this point. But it did exist as a map of plan. Things are a bit different over in the Netherlands and Belgium. So after a disaster where there was a gas explosion during an excavation that killed 22 people, the government intervened immediately and brought in new legislation that said, 1, all asset owners were obligated legally to provide their records into this central system, the CLIP system, and 2, anybody digging a hole legally was obliged to check the plans and to show that they had checked the plans. So some really heavy-handed governance had gone in over there. So we brought in Bart de Lithauer from the Open Geospatial Consortium, who had also had real close links with the CLIP system, to come and talk to us all about the CLIP system and how it worked. We had Joe Parker in talking to us about the Hades project in London, which had produced a similar map with some parties like UK Power Networks, Cadent, Thames Water, and had developed a plan which hadn't gone any further than that, but was a really useful model. And the Vault system, which was used in Scotland by the Scottish Roadworks Commissioner, where there is no sharing agreement at all. People freely share the data, believe it or not, into a central platform, and that runs to this day. And we've had lots of dealings throughout the project with Kat Quain, who's intimately involved in producing that. So looking at those attempts, successful or otherwise, and the pilots, and in particular the commercial offerings. We've all heard of Line Search Before You Dig and DigDat and various other services that are available to bring those things together. But one of the things that our workers told us and the people in the tent told us were the shortcomings of those commercial offerings were they don't provide a single view of what's under the ground, and that's really what's needed here to get over all of those hurdles of line style and representation of the assets. And secondly, they're uninterrogatable. So basically, they're a sheet of paper that you can look at and you can read what's on the surface. There's no interaction. You can't click on an asset and view it, whether it's high voltage, low voltage, high pressure, low pressure, and so on. And we brought in guest speakers and we had lightning talks from a number of people, which really helped us as we designed the solution. So this is just a sort of screenshot of what it was like in the tent there. You can see all the cabaret tables, the Post-its. We brought in celebrities in there to bring a bit of light relief so it wasn't all heavy stuff, heavy going. And then after the first 2 days, we split for the remainder of the event. The last 3 days, people realigned themselves with one of those 3 objectives. And we let them make that free choice themselves. And thankfully, there was about the same number in each of those groups. So one team buried themselves in producing the business case and working on it. All of the legals mostly got involved in writing down the data sharing principles for a data sharing agreement we could use after the event. And thirdly, all the GIS guys, the asset records people got down to building the platform using the data that we had, so that by the end of the week, we could showcase and demonstrate, and we did demonstrate a working platform, a working map with the data that we had in those 4 areas that allowed you to to display basic assets in a standard way, to pan and zoom, to interrogate a line, and that it was browser based, so it would work on a phone or a tablet or a desktop machine. So they were the things that we did do, and thanks hugely to the team at Ordnance Survey and the people from MGIS and One Spatial, whose technical abilities really made that possible. The things we didn't do are as important though. So getting the right attribution. We shared way more information than we needed to share for this job. This came out at the festival. So the amount of information you actually need to safely plan and dig a hole is pretty minimal really. So the asset type, where it is, how deep it is if you have the depth information, what does it look like, what's it made of, how big is it, and what's the voltage or the pressure. So pretty limited. You don't need loads, and we had shared a ton of information. So it became clear there was a piece of work to do to trim down the amount of information that was needed and to get the data sharing piece right. There was high risk zones, so there was no buffers around assets, there was no redactions. So that became very clear. You would need to redact information around certain assets, critical national infrastructure inside a water treatment works or a sewage treatment works, for instance, and the 15-metre buffer zone around either strategic water mains or high-pressure gas mains and high-voltage electricity. Depth wasn't really shared apart from sewers, where we need it because it's a hydraulic model. It relies on gravity, so our records of depth tend to be pretty good. But water mains is pretty well, a nominal depth between 0.75 and 1.15 meters, and then improving the asset data quality. So a huge amount that we didn't do at the event. I guess one of the biggest learnings for events like this is it doesn't just happen overnight, and there's a huge thing about momentum in an innovation project. That once you've gathered those people and infused them, and we did infuse them because at the end of that event, the key players from the organisation stood at the front of the tent and committed to form a consortium and carry on the project. We were so encouraged by what had been produced in such a short space of time. We stood there and made a verbal commitment to the rest of the team and the rest of the world that we would keep working on this. And so we formed that consortium, and I guess we probably ran even harder after the sprint, if that's possible, for the remainder of the time of the project, and pressed on and kept regular meetings in the calendar and brought people together to work on all sorts of different aspects. So there were several phases after that. There was a very small scale local follow-up for about a year, a regional pilot for about a year, and then a national rollout, which Steve's going to be talking about in a short while. So our vision, our high-level vision at the earliest stages, was that we would have a sandbox environment. We would get the same data sharers to use an extended version of the sharing agreement to do a sandbox for the whole of Sunderland, about 280,000 properties in Sunderland, quite a large area. Then we would roll out a year after that to the whole region, and we would decide on what that region would be. And finally, we would try and attract the interest of government and see whether this could potentially, having demonstrated it regionally quite successfully and used it successfully, if we could attract the interest and attention of the government. That part happened much sooner than we could have dreamed of. The way we decided the polygon was simply the area of coverage for the regional year 2 phase of the project, which was called New Hub by that time, Northeast Underground Infrastructure Hub, was to get a polygon for gas, electricity, water, overlay them and look at the common area, which was pretty well Northumbrian Water's operating area. So that was the area that we took, and everybody shared data. But this time, 13 local authorities, all 13 local authorities in the region, we persuaded, with the help of the the Ordnance Survey being backing it, the National Mapping Agency backing it, which gave the project huge credibility, but also a really pretty industrial strength sharing agreement by this stage. All local authorities signed up, and they shared really valuable information we never had at the festival. Conservation areas, wildlife zones, streetlights and the gullies, and some highways drainage, but really importantly, zones. sites of special scientific interest, tree preservation orders, preservation, previous industrial workings. So these zones, what happens in a utility when you're going to dig a hole is it's a very early stage which just says, you know, for the next 100 excavations we're going to do, are any of them within any of these zones? Because if they are, we're going to need to bring in some specialists, like if it's in an archaeological zone, for instance, we're going to need to bring an archaeologist in to supervise the dig. If it's there'll be special conservation, possible wildlife conservation issues to bring about if the area has some kind of special concern there. So that process, again, is a real cottage industry, and we do it for every hole, whether or not it's in a zone. Bringing that information together in a single platform allows that process to be slickened as well. That's a process we call pre-validation, and we can really slicken that process. And we made much more basic the asset information we shared. Another key clincher, really important thing was Ordnance Survey, within 1 month of walking out of that tent, had redeveloped what was done in the tent into a reasonably scalable platform, scalable enough to host data for the whole of the region. So they really buried themselves in producing a very secure platform for us to continue to use, and that was really instrumental, because there's absolutely nothing like having a prototype for people to coalesce around and work out what does and doesn't work, something you can give to field workers to try at the very earliest stages. We're talking about a month after the Innovation Festival, trialing this out in the field with some of our people, which admittedly, given the nature of the kind of information and the implications of getting it wrong, we had to do parallel running. We couldn't just stop doing our existing processes. So that was very much a theme, and the data wasn't being refreshed on a really regular basis either. So that pretty well brought us to the government involvement. So what you can see here, and bottom left-hand corner, that's me, Heidi, and Oliver Dowden, who was the minister at the time, Cabinet Office Minister, and he the project had been raised through various forums, mainly the Geospatial Commission, who Steve will tell you all about in just a moment, was brought in. Well, we attracted the interest of the Geospatial Commission, who really liked the idea, and Oliver Dowden basically granted £3.9 million to fund continued phases of the project, a full-blown pilot in the northeast and in London at the same time, and bring in many more stakeholders and many more resources than we could have ever really afforded. At this point, we were talking about perhaps raising £100,000 or £200,000 to try and continue to do the work, because everything pretty well up to that point had been done free of charge, in-kind contributions from all of those organisations, which is how it became possible. So, I guess key learning from this point was, thank goodness for the Geospatial Commission and government intervention, because at this point, this initiative was becoming really huge and was attracting major interest. And to progress further, we had to surmount some really industrial strength problems like internet security of this data, to the satisfaction of the Centre for National Cybersecurity and probably even more stringently Openreach's data people, who were by far the most stringent on the security of the data. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Steve to talk about the next phase of the project, when the Geospatial Commission and the Cabinet Office became involved in the project. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks very much, and for seamlessness, Clive's going to still drive the slides. So yeah, next slide, please, Clive. So just a little bit about us. I know Clive mentioned the Geospatial Commission. For those of you who are not aware, they're an expert committee with expert kind of board of commissioners that did sit within the Cabinet Office. And with the recent machinery of government change, where we've now moved across into the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, which, for those of you that are not aware, is the old BASE kind of underneath what was the Bayes Directorate. And I think that's a more fitting home, mainly due to the title of Innovation and Technology in the Geospatial Commission, and in particular NWG, where we're looking to utilize the power of location data to unlock economic value for the UK. It kind of suits us perfectly. I'll move slide now and just give a bit more of an overview of kind of where Clive got to and where we are currently, and then where we're heading. So the Geospatial Commission was essentially set up to utilize what was a kind of growing and a growing industry of geospatial technology across the UK, and link up all the different kind of sporadic elements to try and make sure there was a coherent narrative and a UK geospatial strategy. There's 4 missions. I won't go through them all, but the one mission that the National Underground Asset Register sits under is unlocking the power and value of data and location data. So what there was a call for evidence in 2018, and I think at that time, concurrently to that, Clive and his innovative bunch in the Northeast had set about creating what was the beginnings of the new hub, and sharing data for the benefit of the kind of underground asset community in the Northeast. So that really kicked off as a no-brainer that this is something where government intervention could certainly provide and bridge that gap, that there'd been no comprehensive map of all the assets that were underneath the ground in the UK. So I will mention at this time that Scotland does have a roadworks register called Vault, and they're kind of the pioneers. They've had that for 10, 15 years. We have a very, very good relationship with Vault, and we kind of built on and utilized a lot of their learnings, much like a lot of the learnings from the good work done by the Northumbrian Water Group Consortium and the Innovation Project. So then it was onto a pilot. Like with all good projects, programs, you need to prove concept, and that was a triumvirate of organisations. So the Geospatial Commission, Ordnance Survey, and the Greater London Authority, where we had a London Underground Asset Register, and as Clive previously mentioned, the new hub. And that was really a key stage where it was, if we were going to do this for real, what essentially would the sticking points, the barriers, the tricky things which you don't know that are going to come out while you're doing it. So we essentially just learn an incredible amount over that period of time. And here, and I'll come back to that a little bit, and we refer to the period between pilot and the build of the actual platform as the preparation phase, and that's a real key phase, I think, for this audience. Then on to September 21, where we actually started building the thing, to where we are now, March 23, where we're looking to go live in what we term our minimum viable product regions of Wales, London, and the Northeast. And on to essentially September 24. I really see it that the time right now is, even though we've built the thing and we have it sitting there, this is the time now where the true value and the true iteration of the platform is going to happen, because we're going to have live users, end users and organizations actually using this platform and feeding in and providing the team with that feedback as to how it's going to be fit for purpose for them. And that's what really this is all about. It's making sure that whatever we do, it's based on what asset owners need. We are just the kind of vehicle, the mechanism for making sure that whatever is required at that end user through to the data provider is facilitated on the platform. So if I move slides there, please, Clive. So the NUR pilot actually was only meant to be for a year. It was meant to close in, I believe, October 2020, and it actually carried on into the new year, into 2021, because people were actually really getting a lot of kind of value out of it, even just having more information about what was in the ground. But like most things, in particular pilots, they do have to come to an end. You can't operationalize a pilot. So what we did was shut it down as the pilot platform, and kind of closed the doors a little bit to what was a really established and proactive community in the Northeast and in London. And the reason for that was because, like most things within government, we had to then do a lot of planning, take the learnings from the pilot, and make sure that we were putting together a plan and a business case that was going to be fit for purpose for an operational platform. And at that time, there were 5 of us in the small team in the preparation phase. So if we just go on to the next slide. And this was really, really key. I think Clive mentioned it around data sharing agreements and what would get people to sign up to a live platform. And this is really where I came in to the project and set up the legal framework based on the learnings in the pilot. And what we really realized was that we needed access to people's data as soon as possible. That the legal teams are vastly different across different organizations within different sectors, and even within the same sector, they have different size legal teams. I guess the key phrase that we learned through this process is not all asset owners are created equal. Some do have much more, I guess, influence, kind of sway and money to pay for legal support, which goes through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Also, at the same time, we kind of realized that with that access to data, what we needed was a very lightweight, almost a memorandum of understanding or an NDA or whatever you want to call it. We call it a data expiration agreement that is very lightweight. It's a single page, and it just says you will give your data to a secure environment with the NWG team, so that we can then play it back to you and show you what it would look like on the platform. Whilst we're doing that, we can start organizing and sorting out how you're actually going to onwardly refresh that data, and how we're going to then work with you to make sure that as an asset owner, that data refresh is fit for purpose. And then concurrently to that, we can sort out the long-term data distribution agreement, which is all bells and whistles, what everyone is on the hook for, that is signed with the Cabinet Office and now Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. So the full business case was something that we had to do during this preparation phase as well. And that was a progression on from the operational business case, which went through and provided the initial funding. I think the key point to point out here is it's multi-million-pound in terms of what the cost of this was, which I think really shows the reason why the government intervention was required for this, because the market would not be able to solve this itself, because there's no incentive for an organization to take on that level of risk, to fork out that multi-million-pound to build the thing, to craft the legal framework, to get people's data into a platform without any guarantee of success. And that's why government was perfectly placed to do this, with an assessed benefits ratio of, for every pound spent, 30 pounds returned. And so, yeah, for those mathematicians amongst you, you can look at our economic case, which we publish, and see the kind of the 350 million pound per annum expected benefits that we're looking to recoup from the NWG platform. Once the business case was in, which was around spring 2021, we put out the invitation to tender on a government framework. And the government framework is, well, the frameworks, for those of you who are not familiar, it's like a taxi rank. And you have to be on that taxi rank, you have to be a licensed taxi or licensed organization that has the key required skills to deliver such a kind of technical and government major project. Atkins and their supply chain, including Ordnance Survey, One Spatial, and Geoplace, won the contract. And then once everything was put through approval from ministers, they were appointed as the delivery partner for the NUAR platform with a start date of September 2021. The preparation phase can actually be summed up with one capitalized word, which was just planning. There was planning for absolutely every eventuality, every contingency that you can think of when trying to prepare for building the technical solution, but also what is quite a difficult kind of part of the program, which is engaging 650 plus stakeholders and different stakeholders within different organizations, within different sectors in the underground asset community, who have differing levels of data maturity, data quality, and a desire to share that data with anyone else. So if we go to the next slide now. The challenge was really how do we set about doing this, and this is my role now and has been since September 21. We realized very quickly that this was for asset owners, so it needs to be absolutely asset owner focused. Much like every stage of the project, we try to listen more than we actually talk or preach about what's going on. The kind of key bit in any initial contact is to always start with why we're doing this. This was a call for evidence. This was asset owners requesting this platform. This isn't something dreamt up by a government in a dark room in Whitehall. This is something which was born out of the Innovation Festival and requested that we provide as government this kind of bridging the gap between what is currently available and what is needed. And what we really realized from the pilots was there was an absolute need to have influential individuals and influential organizations within sectors and regions. So individuals such as Clive have really been the driving force behind getting NUAR not only understood and contextualized within their own organizations, but also spreading that out to the existing forums which they attend regularly, the events that they attend regularly, saying this NUAR is coming, and you need to be a part of it, and this is why it's going to be of benefit to us. So people like Clive have really been the driving force, and we call them the NUAR champion or the NUAR sponsor within organizations. And all that we do as a team, and all I set my team the goal is to find that person, find that individual within that organization who is empowered and essentially up for driving NUAR, and make sure they understand why that we're doing it, and then give them all the tools that they need, give them everything they absolutely need to make sure that they can communicate effectively to their internal stakeholders and become an advocate for NUAR. So yeah, we'll go to the next slide. And this is the general process. So it's a real kind of high-level overview of what we call the asset owner onboarding journey. So it starts off with initial engagement, and we ask people to sign up to something called the Information Hub, where they can just go hand out different email sign-ups to people within their organization. And it's a one-stop shop for all the information that we've just collated, gathered in a single place. So you can look at security, you can look at the legal framework, you can look at the new iterations of the platform, you can look at the economic case, you can look at anything you want to look at that we have produced about NUAR. It's all in one place. As I mentioned, the lightweight data exploration agreement is the first thing that we really want to get signed between asset owners and our team. And that really allows us to get our hands on that data. While we have that and we have your data, we're talking to the data leads within the organization and trying to agree something called a data ingestion specification. Now, this is a live document which doesn't get signed, it just gets agreed. And this allows us the flexibility to future-proof interoperability and our ability to be iterative with the platform. Because if we had to either re-sign the long-term data agreements every time that we wanted to make a change or alter something around data refresh, that would be unsustainable with 650 asset owners. So we had to really think about, regarding the legal framework, how do we make it all fair for a start, so that everyone is confident that it's fair, that it provides confidence that all bases are covered, but it's also a key one was sustainable, because we don't want to re-sign these ever, really, that we want to be enduring and future proof. So once that data ingestion specification is agreed, then we at any stage you can sign, asset owners can sign the long-term data distribution agreement, and that then allows the NOAA team to publish their information on the platform. And then at the moment, what we're utilizing is through the engagement aspect, we then are facilitating the engagement as end users. And then as we scale, we'll be contacting end users as individuals separate to organizations. Next slide. So this is a kind of follow-on, and we very, very quickly realized, as well as starting with why and giving people all the tools that they needed, engagement is all about, for the NOAA platform, data. We absolutely, everything that we need to have a sustainable and fit-for-purpose platform revolves around getting access to that data. And it was really working with organizations and asset owners to see what kind of state their data was in, explaining to them about our, I think Clive mentioned the international standardized MUDI model, which is I think it's the model for underground data definition and integration. And that was brought in kind of partnership with the Open Geospatial Consortium. And when we get to the platform demo, I can talk you through a little bit more of that. But what we do is, because we're a initiative, and we realized that from the pilots, people were going to be a little bit skeptical about transforming data. Where does that responsibility sit? We really set out to say, well, we'll pay for everything. All you have to do is drag and drop, send it to us. We will transform that data into our schema, harmonized data model, put it through our schema mapping, and then we'll display that back to you as an asset owner of how that looks and what that is. And then, yeah, as I said, agree the data specification, and then publish out on the NOAA platform. Next slide. And these are really just the benefits that we see. So efficiencies in sharing data, reduce risks of showing out, which is a big one. Our primary use case is safe digging. We want to improve the amount of information available to excavators, so that they can carry out their existing HSG 47 and PAS 128. We don't move those safety procedures, those safe digging practices an inch, but what we do is improve the access to information. Next slide. And then building a great service. So I'll talk a bit more about the two-factor authentication when we did the demo. I think I've already done it actually, but yeah. So it's a safe and secure platform. We've been working with what is now the National Protective Security Authority, which was the Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure from the inception start of the project, as well as the National Cyber Security Centre. So all our credentials are completely up to date with what is required for this kind of platform, where we will be holding what organisations consider sensitive assets, especially when aggregated. You'll be able to search by unique property reference number and unique street reference number and postcode, and you'll be able to specify an area with either a circle or polygon, depending on what you need to do. Okay, next slide. This is one which we included because we think that the public consultation was a key part. I think if we were to do it again, it would have been built into the plans from the start, so we may have done it earlier. And this was really asking all the questions about what is it that asset owners need and want from the platform. What are their concerns around commercial and security sensitivities? Who should fund it? Who should pay for it? Is it end user? Is it data provider? And then questions around legislation. So we had a good level of response, which was really very, very useful. That concluded in June 2022. And that's being taken forward to explore the opportunities around what is required legislation-wise. And the key bit there is we don't want to legislate and to force people to have to share data where it's not required. But the overwhelming response was that to achieve maximum participation, prevent the free rider problem, some form of legislation would be wise to ensure that the platform is absolutely all singing, all dancing, and everyone can be confident that the information there is only going to improve without organizations having access to it, without having to share their data. Next slide. So this is where we're at the moment. We have taken a time slice at the 10th of March, but we're making good progress. So we've focused on the 3 regions of North East Wales and London. We already have 277 data exploration agreement signed, and yeah, the number of data uploaded is growing day by day. I think that's actually more like 183 now since the 10th of March. Much like the data sets transformed, that's around the 170 mark, and the DDOs are at 150. So we're making really good progress, and I think now we're hitting that kind of curve where we've proven concept, and all this has been done without having a live platform to point to. So we do expect this to kind of get a lot easier, hopefully, over the next 6 to 12 months. Next slide. And these are kind of, I mentioned the supply chain at the start, and these are the wider government departments who we talk to in the general team. And I think one point which we were keen to bring out was the level of specialization that organizations such as Ordnance Survey, who provide the base mapping, and One Spatial, who do the data transformation, have brought to the team. None of it would be possible without their expertise in taking vast amounts and different types of data and putting it through schema harmonization and mapping it to our muddy model. That is very, very laborious and intense kind of work, and often there are a lot at one time and some tight deadlines to make sure that we turn it around and can make sure that people's data is ready to play back to them and then eventually display on the platform. So it's important to mention their expertise there. And people like the Greater London Authority who have been we've really drawn on their experience in engaging with, in particular, those in London via the London Infrastructure Group, but also their expertise in how to get people moving along their journey quicker, asking the right things, and utilising contacts to make sure that organisations really understand that they should be moving forward with NUAR. And then GeoPlace to utilise their local authority contacts. They know all the local authorities. They know how they operate. They know their kind of fears and concerns, and can really make sure that our stakeholder engagement is effective. Next slide. And this is just a little bit of support from industry, which I won't read out, but you have access to these slides as there. And it's just a bit of a this is why NUAR is good from our perspective. And these are people from industry, water, hawk, field, and an asset owner in the bottom left. Next slide. So I think that's just quickly before I get to the demo, is just that how the kind of hurdles and barriers which we came to and then overcome. It's certainly finding the right people within an organisation, and that is not always the asset manager. It's not always the GIS team lead. It's someone within that organisation, as I mentioned earlier, who can be the NUAR champion or the NUAR sponsor. And then once you have that, they're an advocate and they can drive it within the organization itself with all the tools that we can provide them. A big barrier was not having a live platform to point to. So we created a sandbox environment where we could show people what the platform would look like. The time savers, such as the frequently asked questions, which we front load to our champions and people within the organizations, they're a real of benefit, and making sure that even within our team and the platform itself that we adopted an iterative and adaptable approach. We started off very much one-to-one with asset owners, calling, messaging, emailing, anything at all, and that has gradually changed to one-to-many. It's changed to events, it's changed to face-to-face. It's going around to trusted forums and utilizing trusted partners such as Clive, Northumbrian Water Group, and different contacts around the underground asset sector to really advocate for NUAR in every event and every kind of forum that they're a part of. And what we really realized was that it takes targeted messaging down to the sector and organizational level. So the iterative approach we did start regionally, which made sense to us because we were going to go live in North East Wales and London. But what was very clear is that people within sectors speak their own language, they have their own desires, have their own sector benefits or sector kind of pressures. So we really had to do a lot of understanding, really going through different methodologies of digging deeper to understand, well, what is going on in the water sector now? What is going on in the energy sector now? What would be a barrier to entry, and how do we overcome that? Next slide, please. So I think I'll take over the driving of it there, and I've already gone through the two-factor authentication, which I talked through before, and that's just you sign in, and for security, it then checks that it's the right person who has that, and then you come to this page here, which is the landing page, which is essentially the kind of the shop window. So all the information before this, you would have to click on end user terms conditions, which would say that you accept on the platform that you're only going to use it for guidance purposes only, that you're going to adhere to the license use case. So what I'll do is go to the map. And I think what's key, because this is being recorded, I won't actually be able to show you any of the live assets, just because that is privileged information, and it can't be shown on a live demo. But what I do have is a bookmarked area, but we have recently gone through a kind of iteration. So yeah, so it will say we have a test area at the moment, so we can't operate in that area. But what I can do is talk you through all the features around the platforms, so the layers, the legend, and the different stuff that we do have. I think I mentioned the search area, so you'll be able to search for on unique street reference numbers and property numbers and postcode. So any way that you need to find an area, you'll be able to do it in this search area. I think what will happen is you'll be able to draw either a polygon or a circle. Now, as I said, we won't get any assets actually pop up, unfortunately, but this is just the nature of the guidance we have from our security team. That even the prospect of it being recorded and then put out elsewhere means that we can't actually show the actual data, but I can show you what effectively it would look like. So then we would draw that, and then you click finish, and what would happen is any assets in here would just pop up, and then you'd be able to go across to the layers. I think we do have screenshots, which we have authorized, so Clive can take over driving after I've finished and just show you some screenshots of what it would look like. But we're just very, very security conscious about displaying any assets, even in a kind of test environment. I'll draw your attention here to the legend, and this is the muddy model. So this is all the colors deconflicted to cartographic principles to make sure that we're adhering to one source of truth about what is in the ground. So drainage, they're light blue, telecommunications, grey, electricity, red, gas, yellow, thermal, green, and then water, a slightly darker blue, with sewer, a kind of pale beige there, and then fuel and chemicals, which maps back to the old NWG way of displaying those, and then these non-utility objects, which will be in black. What we also have is the sensitive sites panel. So this could be something pertinent to the water sector, because I know you have critical national national infrastructure assets. And that would essentially list in your zone of interest all the sensitive sites which have either been redacted or obfuscated by the asset owner, because they have complete control over their own data. And then the isolated view. So this isolated view would allow you to toggle on, toggle off all the different assets. So if you had electricity, gas, water on there, you'd be able to toggle it off and say, oh, I only want to look at water. And then you just get that neat view. And in particular areas such as particular areas in the northeast, but also London, that's very useful because it can be quite noisy. So I think I'll stop there, and what I'll do is ask if Clive can show the kind of screenshots, just to show immediately what that looks like.
Yep. So these have all been anonymized, but it's real data. So you can see the complexity of the data there on this screenshot, and this is highlighting the fact that when you click on an asset, you're getting that critical information about what is this, what's it made of, what does it look like, and how big is it, and also some information about the asset owner instantly to hand should there be any kind of problem on site with the asset. And then we have, obviously, it's zoomable and plannable. Really important point here is, no matter how close you zoom in on this, doesn't make it any accurate. This is the same information that is being shared. And so, we make that clear to all the users of the platform that this is the same information they would get if they were obtaining individual plans, and should be treated with the same caution. You can switch views on and off. You can have a look at information by asset owner, by asset type as well. There's a very clear legend here as well over on the left-hand side, which ties in with the muddy model. And so you can see diameter of the main on this screenshot. And the last screenshot I've got, this is showing the zones and how they're represented. In this case, this particular view shows that the pipes in this case are in a conservation area, and so there could be some otters, and the conservation concerns can be taken into account at the earliest planning stage there. So that's, I think, yes, that's pretty well it. I'll unshare at that point. So that marks the end of the demonstration. And I think at this point we're running a little bit behind schedule. But if we can take a 5-minute comfort break and be back promptly, well, it's 8 minutes, okay. So if we can come back at 11:30, then we can take some questions and have some discussion at that point. If you want to plug your questions ideally into the question and Q&A section of the Teams call. So if we meet back at 11:30 prompt, we'll begin then. Thanks very much.
Hi everybody. If we'd like to come back from the break, we've had some fantastic questions come in. So my name is Imelda. I've been in the chat pretty much all of the session, and we're going to move towards the Q&A now with Clive and Stephen. If you do have any questions, if you'd like to ask them in the Q&A functionality, I have seen a couple in the chat which I've noted down, but it just makes it a little bit easier to organise. So Stephen, yep, you're here as well. Fantastic. Okay, so the first question, which comes from, I think it was from Christine, which says, have you managed to get the 650-ish organisations to agree to like a COMO format for the data? I don't know if you know that.
I can take that one. Yes, essentially. But the international standardized data model, the MUDI model, kind of, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It kind of builds on all the kind of information that has been gathered over time. Now, what the challenge is that organizations and sectors kind of have their own way of displaying information to each other and to external actors. So there's always going to be some, I guess, for want of a better word, friction around talking about a harmonized data model and a harmonized way of displaying that information. So where we really had to be very careful were things like displaying high pressure gas, high voltage electricity, and critical water assets, because the different colors that different sectors use to display danger could lead to those end users on the ground essentially mistaking a fiber optic cable for high pressure gas or vice versa. So we can't have that. So we try to stick to those principles as much as possible. But what we have done is made sure that there's absolutely no ambiguity around when you click on the asset and you get the pack, what that asset is displaying. So what we hope to do is with the model, that once we play that back to organizations, they almost adopt those same color scheming. So eventually, as it goes forward and people have that data that's been transformed and played back to them and it's on the NUR platform, and then they've refreshed that data, they actually then adopt the MUDI model in their own systems and their own way of managing that data. So then everyone has a common picture about how to display that data going forward.
And just following on from that, Stephen, really quickly, somebody has asked, what is a MUDI model?
So it's the Open Geospatial Consortium. It stands for the Model for Underground Data Dissemination and Information, I believe. It's quite a mouthful. And what it essentially is a internationally recognised way of displaying different types of assets. So Clive mentioned that we've been in conversation with our Belgian counterparts and our Dutch counterparts, Clip and Click, and they based on that, we work with the Open Geospatial Consortium to try and get a single source of truth that we could use as our data model, essentially.
I would add to that as well that I've had a little look at the MUDI model, and it's an incredibly complete and complicated model. Way above my head, I couldn't understand it at all. But from an asset owner's point of view, actually the process has been made very, very straightforward. So our GIS team supply a file in a given format, a standard format. There's some transformations that take place in the background by OneSpatial, who process the data, and ta-da, it appears in the NUR platform, line styled and represented correctly according to the MUDI model. We haven't really had to worry or get to grips with understanding it. There's a prescribed format you supply data to.
Amazing, thank you. And then I guess so this is one for either of you. So I had two similar questions. So what will the commercial model look like for NUR? Will organizations have to pay to use the data, and if so, how much? And somebody similarly asked, what is the cost of a single map for the March 23rd trial, and what is the commercial model?
well, I guess I can take those, and then Clive can feel free to add any thoughts afterwards. But the commercial model at the moment, so it's free to use until the end of the build phase, which is around autumn 2024, so around September to 2025 potentially. We're currently working on what the cost recovery model looks like based on the public consultation that I mentioned before. Who pays and how much, and how is that going to be fair across 650 to 700 asset owners? I think the key bit of information here is we don't want end users to be charged for this, because that presents to us a risk to essentially the safe digging use case, because we don't want to have anything which would encourage people to not use the platform. So the benefits of the platform of only getting requests to see your data or your information from people who are actually going to carry that through to an intention to dig, so no erroneous requests or superfluous requests to see your information, can actually reduce time and resource within organizations, which we hope would then be a kind of a benefit to that organization in terms of resources and funding, which can then be transferred into the data provider is probably the most likely person or organization to pay for the NUAR platform, and it won't be based on a per usage kind of way. We're kind of figuring out with a bespoke work stream at the moment how exactly it's going to be distributed amongst the asset owners. But what it will definitely be based on is the kind of benefits that you're going to receive from NUAR. Because what we have in the long-term data distribution agreement is, because we don't know what the cost recovery model is, we've got the terms and the clause in there to say, not in these words, but if we get it wrong, you can terminate the agreement. And we can't have that because the platform relies on people's data. So if we get it wrong and we have a mass exodus from the platform will fall in and collapse, and that would be terrible. So we can't get it wrong. So everything will be done, as with everything with the platform, in consultation and with ample notification to data providers and asset owners to then make sure that we're getting it right before we implement that cost recovery.
I would add that from Northumbrian Water's point of view, our estimate is, and it's very clear cut, the cost of not using the platform is way more than any cost that might be incurred by using it, because the efficiencies to be gained are so huge. The likelihood of reducing the likelihood of the utility strike and the associated costs should bring our costs in that area down, and it represents a number of areas of value that we don't get from it. We can't get from any other means. So map pack production being better, data quality improvements. There's a way of improving our asset records through NUAR, which is worth lots to us, because we will through the observation feature, which is in the product backlog, we will be enabled to improve asset data quality, which we couldn't really do any other way other than through our own staff, but this extends it. So to us, it's a no-brainer.
Amazing, thank you for that, both. And then Clive, I'm going to direct this one to you, I think, because I think I've had this conversation around this. So a question from Fiona, which says, will there be any facility for flagging inaccurate data? So if an asset is found in a location other than where it's expected, can that be fed back to the asset owners?
Yes, that's called observation. So we realised this very early on in the very first year of the Sunderland trial, that there was potential to improve asset data quality here. If one asset owner could flag in some way on the plan that something was wrong, either an asset they discovered in their excavation that wasn't shown on the map, or there was an asset shown on the map and they dug down and they hadn't found it in their hole. Now, with the best will in the world, there's an obligation on excavators to inform people when that happens, but who do you tell? And is the person in the field who's digging the hole really going to be able to find the right person who cares enough about the records to put them right? Absolutely no chance. But certainly in the prototype, it's not developed in the minimum viable product yet, but will be coming in the coming months. There's a feature that allows any field worker who's working, regardless of who they work for, to make an observation, to put a flag on the map, to take some photographs down the hole, support it with some dimensions if they are so inclined, and to write a short message. I found a gas main that's not on the map. Submit. Or we dug a hole. There was an electricity cable showing. We didn't find it in our hole, which covers the area of your map. Submit. And that message will find its way through to the asset owners and the asset records team in the background. That's how we had it working in the pilot, and that is in the product backlog. And that's incredibly valuable, because what it means is, rather than your own field force, or you're limited to your own field force providing you information through mobile apps about what's wrong with your records, you're suddenly getting it from a load of other people. Now, it's got to be handled with a lot of caution, and we had a whole workshop about this, because who's the information coming from, and is it accurate, and what should be done with that information is a whole different area. And it's up to the asset owner to decide what they do with that new intelligence. If it's provided by a trusted party, and it's supported by lots of evidence, photographic evidence, and it's irrefutable, the asset owner may choose to just go ahead and update the records depending on the extent of the change. Or they may choose to send a crew out to go and take a look for themselves. Or they may choose to discard it and just leave the flag on the map for future excavators to see. So, there's a whole process around that. It's a really valuable one, because for us, it represents a new source of updating our records to be more accurate.
Amazing, thank you for that, Clive. And then Stephen, one for yourself. So from Tim Evans, it says, you talked about identifying a NWG champion within each stakeholder organisation. Is this a person or is it a role? In other words, how important is it that your champion remains in that role, in that stakeholder? Does the relationship tend to fall over if they move out of that role?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It is an individual, and that's why we within an organisation we seek to get multiple key relationships established. To name but a few, it's the kind of legal lead, the GIS lead, and then just the kind of floating one, which we have referred to as the NWG champion, NWG sponsor. And we can have as many of those as possible, as many people who want to talk to us. We are more than happy to talk to them and get them kind of moving the gears within their organisation, getting them on board to NWG. The commercial kind of lead as well. And all these people, I guess the NWG champion, for just a bit more, they are an individual or group of individuals who will drive the adoption of NWG within their organisation forward. And they will really, really importantly provide context to senior decision makers, to the legal support, and to the commercial aspects. For all the reasons that we've talked about today, all the kind of benefits that Clive pointed out, they are they're going to become the go-to person in that organisation when people have questions, because they are trusted within that organisation. No matter how much I or a member of my team talk to people via Teams or going in person to visit organisations, we're never going to have the same credibility as someone within that organisation who's saying, no, this is what we need. I understand this. I've worked intimately with assets, excavating all the way through. I'm in this position now. This is something which we need, and this is where our organisation needs to kind of focus our attention. So that's what we mean when we say NWG champion. There is as long as that individual can pass over that to someone else, we kind of mitigate that. Where we have experienced exactly as that question raises is when a key individual leaves an organisation and there is no handover, and we have to start again with someone new. That has caused delays, and that's unfortunate. But it's also the nature of onboarding and stakeholder engagement, so we're quite used to it.
I should point out as well, Tim, I'm the champion from Northumbrian Water, and you well know that this isn't my day job. I do this on the side, and I have been doing it for the last 5 years. It's not an all-consuming role, but basically the qualities, apart from being passionate about the subject, are you're kind of a middleman, wheeler dealer, middle person. I'm a facilitator. I'm well connected, so I'm able to find the people who can answer the questions and get involved, or provide data, or answer the legal questions. And we found that with the different organisations involved, certainly in the Northeast, you have a real variety of people. The point I made about it being the passionate person and not the person with a particular role title is so true. So at Northern Power Grid, it was an asset records manager who was doing the championing work. At Openreach, it was an IT manager who was managing IT projects, a system manager who was doing and being the champion and connecting up the people within Openreach. And to Northern Gas Networks, it was the head of innovation. So it can be many different people. That's what I'd say.
Amazing, thank you both. So another question from Steve Allen. So he asks, has an assessment been done of a potential risk that showing a consolidated view with all assets overlaid could lead to a false sense of accuracy when, for example, a gas main is shown to the left of the electricity cable? We'd like to come back from the break. We've had some fantastic questions come in. So my name is Imelda. I've been in the chat pretty much all of the session, and we're going to move towards the Q&A now with Clive and Stephen. If you do have any questions, if you'd like to ask them in the Q&A functionality, I have seen a couple in the chat which I've noted down, but it just makes it a little bit easier to organise. So Stephen, yep, you're here as well. Fantastic. Okay, so the first question, which comes from, I think it was from Christine, which says, have you managed to get the 650-ish organisations to agree to like a COMO format for the data? I don't know if you know that.
I can take that one. Yes, essentially. But the international standardized data model, the MUDI model, kind of, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It kind of builds on all the kind of information that has been gathered over time. Now, what the challenge was is that organizations and sectors kind of have their own way of displaying information to each other and to external actors. So there's always going to be some, I guess, for want of a better word, friction around talking about a harmonized data model and a harmonized way of displaying that information. So where we really had to be very careful were things like displaying high pressure gas, high voltage electricity, and critical water assets, because the different colors that different sectors use to display danger could lead to those end users on the ground essentially mistaking a fiber optic cable for high pressure gas or vice versa. So we can't have that. So we try to stick to those principles as much as possible. But what we have done is made sure that there's absolutely no ambiguity around when you click on the asset and you get the pack, what that asset is displaying. So what we hope to do is with the model, that once we play that back to organizations, they almost adopt those same color scheming. So eventually, as it goes forward and people have that data that's been transformed and played back to them and it's on the NUR platform, and then they've refreshed that data, they actually then adopt the MUDI model in their own systems and their own way of managing that data. So then everyone has a common picture about how to display that data going forward.
And just following on from that, Stephen, really quickly, somebody has asked, what is a MUDI model?
So it's the Open Geospatial Consortium. It stands for the Model for Underground Data Dissemination and Information, I believe. It's quite a mouthful. And what it essentially is a internationally recognised way of displaying different types of assets. So Clive mentioned that we've been in conversation with our Belgian counterparts and our Dutch counterparts, Clip and Click, and they based on that, we work with the Open Geospatial Consortium to try and get a single source of truth that we could use as our data model, essentially.
I would add to that as well that I've had a little look at the Muddy model, and it's an incredibly complete and complicated model. Way above my head, I couldn't understand it at all. But from an asset owner's point of view, actually, the process has been made very, very straightforward. So our GIS team supply a file in a given format, a standard format. There's some transformations that take place in the background by OneSpatial, who process the data, and ta-da! It appears in the NUR platform, line styled and represented correctly according to the Muddy model. We haven't really had to worry or get to grips with understanding it. There's a prescribed format you supply data to.
Amazing, thank you. And then I guess, so this is one for either of you. So I had two similar questions. So what will the commercial model look like for NUR? Will organisations have to pay to use the data, and if so, how much? And somebody similarly asked, what is the cost of a single map for the March 23rd trial, and what is the commercial model?
Yeah, well, I guess I can take those, and then Clive can feel free to add any thoughts afterwards. But the commercial model at the moment, so it's free to use until the end of the build phase, which is around autumn 2024, so around September to 2025 potentially. We're currently working on what the cost recovery model looks like based on the public consultation that I mentioned before. Who pays and how much, and how is that going to be fair across 650 to 700 asset owners? I think the key bit of information here is we don't want end users to be charged for this, because that presents to us a risk to essentially the safe digging use case, because we don't want to have anything which would encourage people to not use the platform. So the benefits of the platform of only getting requests to see your data or your information from people who are actually going to carry that through to an intention to dig, so no erroneous requests or superfluous requests to see your information, can actually reduce time and resource within organizations, which we hope would then be a kind of a benefit to that organization in terms of resources and funding, which can then be transferred into the data provider is probably the most likely person or organization to pay for the NUR platform. And it won't be based on a per usage kind of way. We're kind of figuring out with a bespoke work stream at the moment how exactly it's going to be distributed amongst the asset owners. But what it will definitely be based on is the kind of benefits that you're going to receive from NUR. Because what we have in the long-term data distribution agreement is, because we don't know what the cost recovery model is, we've got the terms and the clause in there to say, not in these words, but if we get it wrong, you can terminate the agreement. And we can't have that because the platform relies on people's data. So if we get it wrong and we have a mass exodus from the platform will fall in and collapse, and that would be terrible. So we can't get it wrong. So everything will be done, as with everything with the platform, in consultation and with ample notification to data providers and asset owners to then make sure that we're getting it right before we implement that cost recovery.
I would add that from Northumbrian Water's point of view, our estimate is, and it's very clear cut, the cost of not using the platform is way more than any cost that might be incurred by using it, because the efficiencies to be gained are so huge. The likelihood of reducing the likelihood of the utility strike and the associated costs should bring our costs in that area down, and it represents a number of areas of value that we don't get from it. We can't get from any other means. So map pack production being better, data quality improvements. There's a way of improving our asset records through NUR. which is worth lots to us, because we will through the observation feature, which is in the product backlog, we will be enabled to improve asset data quality, which we couldn't really do any other way other than through our own staff, but this extends it. So to us, it's a no-brainer.
Amazing, thank you for that, both. And then Clive, I'm going to direct this one to you, I think, because I think you and I've had this conversation around this. So a question from Fiona, which says, will there be any facility for flagging inaccurate data? So if an asset is found in a location other than where it's expected, can that be fed back to the asset owners?
Yes, that's called observation. So we realised this very early on in the very first year of the Sunderland trial, that there was potential to improve asset data quality here. If one asset owner could flag in some way on the plan that something was wrong, either an asset they discovered in their excavation that wasn't shown on the map, or there was an asset shown on the map and they dug down and hadn't found it in their hole. Now, with the best will in the world, that there's an obligation on excavators to inform people when that happens, but who do you tell? And is the person in the field who's digging the hole really going to be able to find the right person who cares enough about the records to put them right? Absolutely no chance. But with certainly in the prototype, it's not developed in the minimum viable product yet, but will be coming in the coming months. There's a feature that allows any field worker who's working, regardless of who they work for, to make an observation, to put a flag on the map, to take some photographs down the hole, support it with some dimensions if they are so inclined, and to write a short message. I found a gas main that's not on the map. Submit. Or we dug a hole. There was an electricity cable showing. We didn't find it in our hole, which covers the area of your map. Submit. And that message will find its way through to the asset owners and the asset records team in the background. That's how we had it working in the pilot, and that is in the product backlog. And that's incredibly valuable, because what it means is, rather than your own field force, or you're limited to your own field force providing you information through mobile apps about what's wrong with your records, you're suddenly getting it from a load of other people. Now, it's got to be handled with a lot of caution, and we had a whole workshop about this, because who's the information coming from, and is it accurate, and what should be done with that information is a whole different area. And it's up to the asset owner to decide what they do with that new intelligence. If it's provided by a trusted party and it's supported by lots of evidence, photographic evidence, and it's irrefutable, the asset owner may choose to just go ahead and update the records depending on the extent of the change. Or they may choose to send a crew out to go and take a look for themselves. Or they may choose to discard it and just leave the flag on the map for future excavators to see. So there's a whole process around that. It's a really valuable one, because for us it represents a new source of updating our records to be more accurate.
Amazing, thank you for that, Clive. And then Stephen, one for yourself. So from Tim Evans, it says, yeah, you talked about identifying a NWG champion within each stakeholder organisation. Is this a person or is it a role? In other words, how important is it that your champion remains in that role, in that stakeholder? Does the relationship tend to fall over if they move out of that role?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It is an individual, and that's why we within an organisation we seek to get multiple key relationships established. To name but a few, it's the kind of legal lead, the GIS lead, and then just the kind of floating one, which we have referred to as the NWG champion, the NWG sponsor. And we can have as many of those as possible, as many people who want to talk to us. We are more than happy to talk to them and get them kind of moving the gears within their organisation, getting them on board to NWG. The commercial kind of lead as well. And all these people, I guess the NWG champion, for just a bit more, they are an individual or group of individuals who will drive the adoption of NWG within their organisation forward. And they will really, really importantly provide context to senior decision makers, to the legal support, and to the commercial aspects. For all the reasons that we've talked about today, all the kind of benefits that Clive pointed out, they are they're going to become the go-to person in that organization when people have questions, because they are trusted within that organization. No matter how much I or a member of my team talk to people via Teams or going in person to visit organizations, we're never going to have the same credibility as someone within that organization who's saying, no, this is what we need. I understand this. I've worked intimately with assets, excavating all the way through. I'm in this position now. This is something which we need, and this is where our organization needs to kind of focus our attention. So that's what we mean when we say Nuar champion. It is as long as that individual can pass over that to someone else, we kind of mitigate that. Where we have experienced, exactly as that question raises, is when a key individual leaves an organization and there is no handover and we have to start again with someone new. That has caused delays, and that's unfortunate. But it's also the nature of onboarding and stakeholder engagement, so we're quite used to it.
I should point out as well, Tim, I'm the champion from Northumbrian Water, and you well know that this isn't my day job. I do this on the side, and I have been doing it for the last 5 years. It's not an all-consuming role, but basically the qualities, apart from being passionate about the subject, are you're kind of a middleman, wheeler dealer, middle person. I'm a facilitator. I'm well connected, so I'm able to find the people who can answer the questions and get involved or provide data or answer the legal questions. And we found that with the different organisations involved, certainly in the Northeast, you have a real variety of people. The point I made about it being the passionate person and not the person with a particular role title is so true. So at Northern Power Grid, it was an asset records manager who was doing the championing work. At Openreach, it was an IT manager who was managing IT projects, a system manager who was doing and being the champion and connecting up the people within Openreach. And to Northern Gas Networks, it was the head of innovation. So it can be many different people. That's what I'd say.
Amazing, thank you both. So another question from Steve Allen. So he asks, has an assessment been done of a potential risk that showing a consolidated view with all assets overlaid could lead to a false sense of accuracy when, for example, a gas main is shown to the left of the electricity cable? This is until all assets are recorded to the PAS 256 standard of 100 millimeters, and when using satellite surveying, or 300 millimeters if not. But this won't happen with the length of historical records.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really important point to make, and I think in every engagement that I'm a part of, when we get towards the legal data distribution agreement signing, etc., I really emphasize this point about what it is that we're doing here. So we're providing the information up to a certain point, a line in the sand where we just provide all the information, and then that line in the sand is very much stops at whenever people get onto site. When people are on site, everything that they do now in terms of following their safe dig procedures, HSC 47, PAS 128, will absolutely remain. We go as far as to say in the end user terms and conditions that you have to click through, which I talked through on the platform demo, that all information on Nuar is for guidance purposes only. What we don't want is to the opposite of what we want is to break down any communication between asset owners, so data provider and end user as an excavator. We actually want to improve that conversation. So where the key kind of driver for Nuar is that you'll have that single view that you'll be able to toggle off using that isolated view if you only want to see a specific asset, but you can see the broad picture of assets available in that area. You can have that list of who you need to contact, and then you'll also then just be able to instantaneously see that and then contact them, rather than firing out kind of spurious phishing lines to see who might be in the area. You'll have access to who is definitely in that area. You can see their assets, and on the other end, you can see if people have looked at your assets and have an intention to dig within your region. And as a data provider, we go even further to say, if you're nervous about people digging in the vicinity of your assets because they're sensitive or they have a particular need for site supervision, you can mark that in the metadata of your assets, and you can have them redacted, and you can have them not fully visible on the platform. So a buffer area around that asset to say, if you're going to be digging in this area, contact this number, and then this person will come and supervise that digging or give you the required site pack that you need to safely excavate in the vicinity of. So it's absolutely the right question, pertinent question. We only go up to the point where we're providing information. It's all for guidance purposes only. Everyone must still absolutely communicate with each other and follow the safe digging practices when on site.
Yeah, great question, Steve. I completely agree with all those points that Steve made. It's more than a risk. I mean, pretty well without exception, everybody that I've shown or inducted and invited to the staging version of the platform have gone, oh wow, look at this, you can zoom right in, look how great this is, and that assumption is the data's that accurate, it's much better data, and we're at pains to point out, and it's part of our induction process. This is the same data you've always been working with. It's no more accurate. It's just being represented in a different way. So treat it with exactly the same caution that you would any other plan. The terms and conditions also for the platform, they're about 14 pages long. It's quite a big ask to expect people to work their way through that, every single user. We've written a paraphrased version, which we've run past our legal team, which is on a page, which condenses it down to the key points. There's still an obligation to read it, obviously, but there's a high probability they will read one page of, you may do this, you may not do this, you must do this, you must never do that. And this is kind of a bullet pointed one pager I send out to all of our people who get the platform before I grant them access to it, and then a supervised training session to ram home the point.
Yeah, really great question. Thank you, Stephen. Great answers from both of you. Okay, so one that's come through the chat, and maybe Clive, I don't know if you'd like to take this one. It says that for water companies, are there opportunities to use this tool to improve leakage detection?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So in the very early stages, a forum called Project Iceberg did some work on looking at all the use cases for such a platform where that kind of data was held. And they came up with 12 different use cases, that being one of them. Discovering risks you didn't know you had was another one, where perhaps multiple assets were very close together that could cause problems. So there was flooding of basements was another. So there are many use cases. Now, the important thing to note here is that NUAR, as it is in its current form, is mandated for the use for the planning and excavation work only at this stage. So that's what it's doing. Steve, you'll probably have got some more things to say, because the data sharing agreement permits other uses, and already we're starting to see ideas coming forward and early thoughts about the potential use of the data for other purposes.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really have anything else to add to that, Clive. That's a very succinct answer.
So the question asker might have been thinking about using fibre for the detection of leakage. Fibre nearby to water pipes. So knowledge of where there's fibre nearby water pipes would be a really useful thing to have, and the platform would have it.
Absolutely. And I think we could definitely speculate a lot. I think the possibilities are certainly endless. Taking one which definitely came across my desk, which is probably the most useful, is a case study where there was a gas pipe which exploded and parts went into a water pipe, and then the water pipe infiltrated the gas main. So I think in that respect, what they were looking for was to say, from a visual perspective, where you can have gas assets and water assets overlaid, is there something which you could look at and identify where those assets were parallel, overlapping, or at an angle, or depth, or whatever, which will be available because the gas company who happen to and the water company are both signed up and fully on the platform. So what we can do is create a kind of a side specialist project where we have a kind of an area environment where both those assets are overlaid. Both the individual organizations teams look at that asset data because they're both shared and are fully licensed to view that data, and they can do a bit of vulnerable point analysis around their network to say, well, if it happened here, these are likely areas where it could happen again, so we probably need to send specialists out to those sites to really look at and examine to make sure that those pipes have the required distance, either depth or distance from parallel. So I think I was reluctant to answer because the possibilities are endless, and I get carried away when thinking about what can be done between organizations in upstream disaster prevention, resilience planning, all these things. They're future use cases for a rich data quality and data mature environment are fantastic. But at the moment, we just want to deliver the thing, which is why I always pull myself back.
So I was on mute there. Amazing. Thank you for that, Stephen. I just dropped a message in the chat. We're going to ask a couple more questions, but just any that we don't manage to get to, I will share with Clive and Stephen, and that can go out alongside the recording. So I just want to combine two questions here. So we've got one from David and one from Priya. So David asks, will this model include redundant assets? And Priya says, how is NUR planning to capture the asset improvements that would happen in a network as a part of a continuous improvement or part of future growth process? So for example, any new assets being included or replaced in an existing network. So question on redundant assets, and then a kind of follow-up, I guess, on new assets.
Yep, so the redundant assets will be captured in the any other, so the black one that I showed you on the legend. So that would be kind of either something that's found which is unidentified and they're not sure who it is until it can be attributed to whichever organization it belongs to, or it's just something that is there and will be, as Clive said, with all the evidence that you can possibly put to their pictures, descriptions, etc., exact location, which is part of the observation tool that will be in effect on the platform. I think moving on to the asset improvement, that is something which, we're absolutely committed to capturing, and it's really as quickly as any organisation can update their own records and then refresh that onto the platform. So in the data ingestion specification, we kind of set a very low bar to entry of in line with the new Roads and Streetworks Act 91, that we want data current to within the last 90 days or 3 months. And that's just as you have to provide now, confirm up to date or provide asset records that are within the last 90 days upon receipt for anything that for statutory undertaking purposes. We're trying to kind of mirror that and just make sure that that's the very minimum that we're offering on the platform. What we're actually trying to get to is a place where people are refreshing the currency that they want to for safe digging. So high pressure gas and high pressure, high voltage electricity and certain water assets will want to refresh much more frequently than that. I'm sure Clive will have a view on that. But yeah, as soon as it can be updated in your records, it can be refreshed onto the platform and then it's there.
Yep, I've got some comments about those two. On the first one, during the pilot, we had quite a debate about decommissioned water mains and abandoned water mains as well. So, there's a subtle distinction between those two categories of asset and how they should be shown. We waste quite a lot of time sometimes digging something up and then having to verify whether it's live or not because it's not shown on the plan. Is it an asset that isn't known about, or is it an abandoned main? So certainly in the pilot, there was functionality to denote those subtle distinctions. On the second question around improvement, yes, the onus is on the asset owner to provide the data as frequently as they like. So Northumbrian Water will be supplying a monthly data load to begin with, because we can, and it's relatively straightforward. And as we automate the process, though, we'll have a slider bar that allows us to go to weekly and then ultimately daily, providing updates. So, once it's automated, it's very, very straightforward for us to do that. But monthly at the moment.
Amazing, thank you both. So very last question from Caroline. So she says, I'm curious why there's a view that the map pack production has not changed over the years, as there are some organisations who do provide collated and annotated packs, both in a single map format and overlaid in a scalable and automated way. So I agree that it is a challenge that the data is held over a number of organisations. However, they are produced generally in less than 15 minutes. So I don't know if either of you have a response to that one.
So I would say our field force tell us that frequently they get out onto site armed with the set of maps and plans, and they go to start digging, and they realise although the water's coming out of a particular location, that's not where they need to dig. So they need to dig just off the edge of the map, and a 15-minute to 30-minute delay in waiting for new plans to be provided actually by our own team, not through one of these specialist services, but a comparative time is too much of a delay. It stops the job. You also have to think about reactive jobs. So many of the jobs that we do, and much of the work we do, is sending a distribution technician out to have a look at a job before the job has ever been planned in. And having the information, having the map plan instantly available to them through NUR is a major boon, because they can spec the job out, they can size it, they can work out what kind of obstacles they are, and they can raise a job with all the warnings about this is going to take a long time because it's very complicated under the ground. That information is provided instantly, and if it's just off the map, they can just pan and scroll and get an instant new version of the map. So I guess minutes count. 15 minutes doesn't seem like a lot of time, 15 to 30 minutes with all the phone calls, but it is our field force are telling us it is. And I'm sure our customers and the general public would welcome a half an hour reduction in, disruption.
Amazing. That's a great answer to that question. So we've come to the end of the session. I just wanted to say thank you to both Clive and Stephen. That was super informative. We have a poll that will be coming on your screen now. If you just want to kind of rate our the session, so how useful or engaging did you find today's event? Just as a reminder that the recording and slides will be sent out after this session, alongside the case study in the next couple of days, and any questions that weren't able to be answered in this session, I will send to Clive and Stephen to pick up on. So I think there was only maybe 3 or 4 that we've missed, but thank you for all the engagement in the chat, and thank you, Clive and Stephen, for a really, really fantastic session. Amazing. Okay, thank you all, and I will let you all get your lunch and get back to your day. Thank you. Thanks.